Hello and welcome to Law and You here on Independent Television. We are in Benin City, Nigeria. Thank you for joining us. For this week, we want to bring the conversation closer to home. By that, we want to look at issues around state houses of assembly. I mean, we've taken our time to talk about issues around legislature. All right, we've taken our time to talk about that at the level of the National Assembly, which is a combination of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Somehow in the middle, it's likely that there is an element that is missing, which is the State House of Assembly itself, which of course, naturally, is much closer to the people. It's easier and faster for the people to, as it were, interact, all right, have a back and forth of whatever sort with their members of houses of assembly in their respective states. But then again, one of the issues that have been raised for so many years has been the insinuation in many quarters that several state houses of assembly are tied to the apron strings of state governors. What that means is you find situations where people talk about how that state houses of assembly have become rubber stamp to the governor. So whatever the governor does influences their own actions. Some persons talk about things like body language of the governor determining what the state houses of assembly do. We've seen situations, for example, where a governor defects from a particular party. All members, in some cases, go with him. Sometimes a chunk of the members would go with him. We've seen states, in this country, real time, where the governor has even had to find reasons to, as it were, to stifle the finances of state houses of assembly, which essentially, very critically too, raises questions around the independence, practically speaking, of these houses of assembly as it stands today. And then going forward, you're wondering, what are the implications of this kind of development for the growth and, of course, the advancement of these different states? Every time a new governor comes into office, it changes the direction, it changes the system of the houses of assembly, because many persons have said the governors have enormous influence on these houses of assembly. One man is here who has seen, as they say, has been there, done that, all right, with regards to state legislation, and he will share his experience and then help us shed light on what really the issues are. Stay with me. Barrister Friday Ogerahi is a former member, Edo State House of Assembly, and of course is also a politician and a very, very staunch party man. Thank you so much for coming on the program. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me once again.
I want us to quickly talk about, first of all, I know, of course, you've had experience in this area, no doubt about that. But I'm also sure that you have had your concerns as to the independence, some people say the autonomy, of a state house of assembly in this country today. Where exactly are we?
I will start like this, because discussing a topic like this one is one that seemingly must be considered from more than one perspective. Be that as it may, and having said that, I will tell you straight away that where we find ourselves today, talking about independence of the houses of assembly in each state of the Nigerian Federation,
right?
I will tell you that it is not an enviable one. It is indeed very pathetic, because I have often also said that you can't talk about democracy without talking about limitations of powers. Limitation of power in the sense that in the arrangement of governmental powers, there's this tripartite thinking, and that framers of our constitutions also brought to bear here, that power should be shared between essentially three arms of government, talking about the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And zeroing down to the states in our whole country, it is not too difficult to find that there are some responsibilities that are enshrined in the Constitution, generally referred to as a list of responsibilities in the schedules to the Constitution. whereby for the state they have responsibilities, areas where their legislature, the state House of Assembly, will have legislative competence, you know. So the powers, as it were, ordinarily derive from the Constitution. The creation, the establishment, the existence of the State Assembly is derivable and is rooted in the Constitution. But in practice, what do you find? You know, you virtually lifted the lead of the can. You know, by when you mention such words like the State House of Assembly being seen as a rubber stamp, being seen as a follow, being seen as a puppet in the hands of the governors, powerful governors as it were. You know, because I think in Nigeria is where chief executives, you know, almost second to only the Almighty God, by the way and manner they exercise power with impunity, without control.
Can we blame that exercise of power on the Constitution? Because some persons say the Constitution gives these chief executives so much of latitude.
Well, not necessarily the Constitution, but I will tell you from my own personal experience straight away that essentially it has to do perhaps first with the individual, the individual legislator who has been elected to represent a constituency.
Right.
What are his persuasions? What are his motivations? And by what process did he eventually, you know, gain entrance into occupying a seat in the House? You know, these are considerations, these are factors that actually limit. There are limitations, as it were, you know, to the independence first of the individual legislator before you start talking about the corporate independence. Before you start talking about it, you have to first look at those who constitute it, because these things are not. You don't look at it as if it's just an abstract thing. There are human beings occupying seats in those houses.
Very true.
And if they believe that they owe a certain power, a certain person, you know, some difference, some obligation, to that extent will it limit their powers and functions in the House, you know, because at the end of the day, some of them, with the greater respect, may not really know the enormity of the powers that it has in them. So, where you find that kind of a house, you know, with some kind of element who always feel inadequate by reason of the fact that, I owe my coming to this house not to the people who voted for me, but to one man who is the governor, then you are going to have problem. Right. You are going to have what you refer to as rubber stamp legislature, and that is the dilemma that we find ourselves today. You know, beyond that, you talk about issues of remuneration. Remuneration, you know, they have been talking about how to cure it. How do we cure this? How do we make it a practice or a custom, a tradition, whereby the legislature really will be self-accounting? The legislature we don't need to go even for a mere biro or pen to write. Go to the executive cap in hand to ask for fund or funding in the discharge of its duties. You know, not to talk about their take-home pay, as it were. Where all of this is in the hands of one man, of course, it brings to your mind the saying that he who pays the piper actually dictates the tune.
Right.
It is what that man who pays the piper wants that that will be given to him. You know, so that is where we are. So when you want to talk about addressing critically the issue of independence of the legislature, being able to stand and do their job properly, you know, you must also talk about where is the money they are going to, their expenses, who is going to foot it, and where is it coming from? We all know that, yes, we're taking Nigeria as a custody as we have it, that yes, we all seem to feed from one common pool of funds. Yeah. But who actually, you know, is in custody of that fund, who disburses it, you know? But you now see that governors Governors in Nigeria, generally speaking, not talking about one or two persons, I'm talking about in general terms, you know, now uses what actually would have been the entitlement, legitimate entitlement, as a of the state legislature as a controlling tool. You know, they now hold it onto it and use it as a weapon of a means of patronage. You know, to those who may be quote unquote said to be loyal. You know, what loyalty to who? Is it loyalty to the governor or loyalty to the state? It ought to be loyalty to the state, being able to do what you are supposed to do. You know, that you also raises a point in mind. You know, why you feel that no matter the excesses, and the aggrandizement, you know, of governors, you have not seen you have not particularly seen, you know, without maybe some underground unseen hands. You know, you have not actually seen a House of Assembly rising to the occasion to say this governor has misbehaved, this governor has violated the Constitution, this governor has committed a pitchable offense. To that extent, we are going to call him to question. So why do we now find that it is only some time after a governor has left office, you find maybe luck running out of that governor and is arrested abroad and prosecuted for what the House of Assembly ought to have done? Because it is part of the oversight functions of the House of Assembly to know how monies are spent, how procurements are made, how whether jobs are being done to standard or otherwise, state jobs for that matter. But when they now realize that, oh, their fate, as it were, maybe for those who want to continue to return to the house, because you also know that in Nigeria there's no limitation to the time, number of times that electors will come to the house. Right. For those that who believe that they owe their return to the house to a particular governor, of course you don't expect them. You know, it will be like putting their political career on the line.
Let me bring to your mind something that happened very, very recently in Kano State. I mean, news reports about how that the House of Assembly in Kano State had actually suspended, or rather recommended immediate suspension of the chairman of Internal Revenue Service in Kano. And of course, political analysts are saying that in such a situation, the governor should have taken a cue from that to suspend him formally, because the basis was that IGRO in Kano had dropped very significantly. Kano, according to them, that had been the second highest in IGRO across the country, right after Lagos, had become ninth. I mean, from top to bottom, that far. So they said it was abysmal performance on the part of the chairman. So on that basis, they strongly recommended its immediate suspension, which a lot of analysts have said should have happened, give or take, within 48 hours. Some persons on the one hand have said the governor had not been in the country at that time. Others are saying that the governor called the bluff of the House of Assembly, went ahead to retain the man. We've seen similar scenarios play out in this country, for example. What lessons should legislators, particularly at the state level, be learning from instances like this?
Well, a lot of lessons actually, but taking that particular Kano incident into cognizance, there are you can't actually reach any conclusion from
is it open-ended,
a one-sided view of the matter,
right?
You know. Because first and foremost, you will realize that the man who is chairman or otherwise of
the Internal Revenue Service
is an appointee of the executive.
Okay.
And there are regulations, there are laws guiding that appointment, as it were. And that being the case, the discipline or otherwise of such an appointee, you know, should actually reside with the executive, particularly the governor. You know, so. That is not to suggest that what the House of Assembly will not have a say in the matter. But the point I'm trying to make, talking also as a lawyer, is that such resolutions could be merely advisory. Okay. It is not one that can be enforced, as it were. You know, it could be a resolution that is persuasive in nature, because for a state House of Assembly, it is an it's an influential institution whose pronouncement, resolution, advice should be given a lot of weight. So, but it does not, for as far as it relates to the matter in issue, the subject matter about the appointment of an individual, like I said, it should be more or less an advisory thing. It should be persuasive. The governor still reserves the discretion. He still reserves the discretion whether or not to sanction, as it were, the person, not necessarily because the House of Assembly says so.
Okay.
Yeah. So for that may not be a way to assess whether or not the House of Assembly has power. There are powers that the House of Assembly have. I said so.
Are they maximizing those powers?
That is the real question. That is the real question. And I don't think they are using their powers. In fact, at the end of the day, you see digressions. You see a legislature, who has so much to do. If you look at where we are as a people, the different level and stages of development of our people, or even if you like underdevelopment, you know that if really we are supposed to be people that take ourselves seriously, that there's enormous work, that the legislature ought to do for that first 4 years that you are elected to serve your people. In fact, like this man was quoted as saying, the governor of Kaduna State, he said, when I came in, all my hair, I had all dark hair, but today I'm all gray hair. I believe that for a legislature, it could even be more than that.
More intensive.
I'm telling you, because you have to think about law, because law is what makes democracy to run. Society runs on law. So if we now, it might interest you to know that there are still laws that we use in better states that are now like so obsolete, whereby you still have offenses. You still have offenses where a person, if found guilty, will be made to pay a fine of maybe 1 naira. You understand? Maybe that offense, the offense committed would have ought to attract a graver sanction. But because we seem to have misplaced our priorities. I am one person that believes that legislators should not have any business with what is it called now? What they call consultancy project. What has the legislator to do with execution of project? You now also see our people say, oh, this legislator, we voted him since we went there.
He has not done anything.
He has not done anything. Only because perhaps he has not been able to attract to come.
So that probably puts them under pressure to bring tricycles, grinding machines, sewing machines.
Yes.
And then he sinks a borehole or two.
Thank you. Which for me, like I said, these are digressions. These are not the core duties of the legislator or the legislature. The other day I had the luxury of time to sit down and watch a debate on BBC when the UK Parliament was sitting, and they were discussing the sudden withdrawal of the Allied forces from Afghanistan. Right. You saw the heated debate, you see the culture, you see the questioning, you see the Prime Minister being asked several critical questions by legislators. That is how it ought to be. Because we seem to have borrowed a culture that we are not even in a hurry to understand. We are not even in a hurry to appreciate, because a legislature ought to be the bastion, as it were, of democracy.
Good. I think we need to talk about these issues a bit further, but we're going to push it, of course. Just expand the narrative in a bit. Quickly, we're taking a break, and we're back shortly. So I was going to ask you this. Some time ago, President Muhammadu Buhari intervened by way of executive order into these issues around, as it were, independence or autonomy for judiciary, for legislature. Was that a flash in the pan?
It is one thing to make pronouncement. You don't forget in a hurry too that we have had to grapple in this country with rhetorics that do not really go beyond rhetorics. That's why people talk about, oh, where is the corresponding political will
to drive it?
To drive it. Where is that sense of purpose and vision and result? A government that is result oriented will not make pronouncement and let it fritter into the air. It will put in place arrangement to see to its realization. You were in this country when judiciary workers went on strike over what? The issue of autonomy. And all over the country, governors sermonized on it. You talked about, oh, there was an executive order. I don't think any governor, as it were, in this country has given a hoot about what that executive order stands for, because it serves their purpose, it serves them good. It is something they seem to be enjoying, you know. So they are not in a hurry to see to it that yes, this division in the powers of government, you know, is really seen in reality, seen in practice as it ought to be. So beyond executive orders as made by President Buhari, no matter how sincere or honest that perhaps those orders stand to be, if the president himself is doing otherwise, then you will be like waiting for Godot, in actually thinking that will bring about the needed desired result.
Right.
So that it is about, let us pursue thoroughly and fundamentally, with all commitment, the issue of actually saying that even within the constitutional provision, this independence are well entrenched. Entrenched for the executive, entrenched for the judiciary, entrenched for the legislature, so that each and every one of these arms of government will function within their own confines without unnecessary interference and control. Right. And one significant point that we have been able to identify in all of this is the issue of funding, critical. Then they also talk about the recruitment process. The recruitment process. Whether by, if you have a flawed election, if you have people who rigged the election, who bought their way
into office,
as legislators in this instance now, you don't expect them to be loyal to whatever constituent that they are representing. You know? So that is the way I see it. And that's the way I believe it is.
Having said that, I want to ask you this as we wrap up now. Is there any role political parties could play in this conversation about independence, possible independence, in practical terms of the legislature? Because it is political parties that throw up the governors, members of the legislature, and so on and so forth. Because people talk about how that the party actually formulates and advances the manifesto. That manifesto, ideally, one would think, should be the driving force behind whatever the governor and the legislatures do. It appears as a broken link, obviously, between the party and those they throw up. Right.
Father is a fantastic one, because we practice as a people party democracy, and party democracy ought to be a very good idea. In the sense that it is the political party that seemingly is the factory that bakes the ideas,
right?
That inculcate and feed their flag bearers, their members as on the whole. With this is what we believe, this is our philosophy, this is our idea. So that when you now say, oh, I am a candidate of party this and party that, you already have a legislative agenda consistent with the provisions of your manifesto. So that you are not going to go there and be on your own, you know, dealing with legislative matters, in accordance with your whims and caprices. But because you have been schooled, now knowledgeable in the ideas of your political party, when you stand up to speak on any issue in the parliament, one will know the line you are going to toe. You'll be predictable. But is that the case today? No. That is not the case. Because there has been a failure. There has been a failure on the part of the political party system. And actually,
their members into
taking their members through orientation, schooling, education.
That is missing.
That is missing. It's a big failure. We take some of these things for granted. It is not out of place to find political parties sending some of their members for re-education, whether within the country or outside the country.
I think it's
to acquire knowledge on political party ideology, on philosophies, on how a country,
governance and leadership.
On governance and leadership.
I think for all you have said so far, one thing stands out for me basically, and that's the fact that we have work to do, particularly as legislators and then the political parties that churn out these legislators. Thank you so very much for coming on the program. I'll be talking with Barrister Friday Ogera. He's a politician, former member, Edo State House of Assembly, doubles as a lawyer. That's what we're leaving it this week on the program. Thank you everyone for spending a part of your time with us. I'm Uya Agmafwegwe. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.